Tonight, Canadians are paying more than ever for groceries.
And Canada Post in crisis and facing strikes. And Canadian women athletes are dominating the world stage. From Montreal, I'm Eddie Tekalik.
And I'm Gary MacDonald. This is episode 53 of Night Talk Canada, honest, unfiltered Canadian. The conversation we should be having, and we want you to be a part of that conversation. Post your comments on any or all of tonight's topics. Now let's get started.
The Liberals have 4 sneaky grocery taxes that are embedded in everything you buy. First, the industrial carbon tax on fertilizer and farm equipment drives up the cost for our producers. Second, they're gradually raising a sneaky new carbon tax on gas and diesel, which will rise to 17 cents a litre, the same level of the previous Liberal carbon tax. Then there's the food packaging tax, which they are putting in place that will raise the cost of food and groceries by $400 per year per family. And then, of course, there's the worst tax of all, and that is the inflation tax. And that happens when governments run enormous deficits that they pay for by printing money, and that bids up the cost of everything. I'm not going to hold Mark Carney to my standard. I'm going to hold him to his own. He promised in the election he'd bring more affordable food. He said that Canadians should judge him by their experience at the grocery store. That's a quote. Since that time, beef is up 33%, soup 26%, grapes 24%, coffee 22%, beef stewing cuts 22%, and it's not a global issue. It's not a foreign issue. It's a Mark Carney Liberal issue. Food prices are rising 48% faster in Canada than they are in the United States of America, and you can't blame tariffs because American tariffs do not apply on food consumed here in Canada.
Well.
Yeah.
So he's on a new crusade, I should say. And guess what? Groceries are getting expensive every week. And as we heard from Polyev, he's putting the spotlight back on food inflation. But what is really behind the price hikes? Retailers' greed, uncontrollable circumstances. Well, we're going to break it all down. And let's go to our first graphic on this issue tonight. The causes of grocery creep. Well, we have energy and input costs related to farming. We have weather, climate, and production shocks such as droughts. We have supply chain and logistics disruptions, rail strikes, for example, port congestion. We have foreign exchange and import dependency, because we do import a large amount of produce, especially when it's out of season. And of course, a weak Canadian dollar, which it is right now, those imports even more expensive. Labor and downstream costs, from farm labor to processing plants to grocery staff, wage pressure, labor scarcity help to push up the costs. Retailer and corporate pricing, also known as greedflation. Critics argue some grocers and suppliers have squeezed margins higher under the cover of inflation and pushed up those prices even more. So, what is it? What do you think it is? And we'd like to hear your thoughts, because I know I was just up to Metro this afternoon to pick up a couple of things. And every time I walk in now, there's always something that catches my eye where I've like $1.50, in some cases a $2 jump in the price of whatever it can be. Now, there are a number of reasons as to what's going on. Polyev is pointing to what he calls the Liberal grocery taxes. Some of them have said, he suggested are hidden. They're not. And I think when you listen to some economists explaining exactly what's going on here, especially related to the taxes, that what's being presented by Polyev is not quite what it appears to be. And there are a number of other factors coming into play here. Eddie, what are your thoughts on this? Oh, there we are. Right on to you, Eddie, because I just asked you what your thoughts are on it. And he froze again. Okay. Eddie seems to be having a little bit of difficulty, but at least he froze with a smile on his face this time. So that's not too bad. Uh, why don't we just flip over here to me and there, that's good. Wait for Eddie to make his way back. So really, as I said, Polyev is hammering the Liberals over rising grocery bills, blaming taxes and carbon pricing, corporate markups. Markets point to supply chain costs, global inflation, and retailer concentration, which means our market here in Canada, as far as our choice, is limited as far as retailers are concerned, grocery retailers, and families feel stuck paying more or less. And first, it was shrinkflation. As we came out of the pandemic, smaller sizes started showing up, and for the same price or higher, as the higher prices of the inflation didn't seem, or of the pandemic, I should say, didn't seem to shrink away at all. So, what do you think? Do you think Ottawa is tackling the costs or adding to them? Are grocers unfairly profiting? Can competition or policy relief ease the squeeze? Competition, definitely. But again, we're a country of 40 million people. Yes, we're growing. But when you look at the 40 million, look at where the greatest percentage of that population is centered, right on the southern border of the country. Is it viable for other companies to come in and try and set up a national grocery retail chain, or would regional chains have a better opportunity, better chance of going? Because all you ever hear from the grocery industry is we're working on very, very low. And to a degree, yes, because a lot of spoilage involved, breakage, but especially with the fresh fruits and other produce, there's a lot of spoilage involved as well. And then you have the best before dates coming up on a lot of canned goods and bottled goods, where after a certain point they can't sell them. They have to do something with them. And then your bakery section, another meat section, fishery, fish section, also things like eggs and dairy. Now, in the past, and it's been a while since I've had any direct contact with any grocers or people working selling to the grocery industry, but I know there were a few things. Yes, they were working on, but I think grocery retailers were working on. They were really pushing suppliers, and their margins were extremely low. And they were also ending up at one point having to pay, if you wanted your product at eye level on shelving throughout the store, you had to pay a premium to get those facings at eye level, which is naturally where we go first. As we're human and everything is at eye level, we look for it, and there it is. So we have that aspect of it. Eddie, what are your thoughts?
Well, sorry I cut out there for a second, Gary. You know what? I certainly am seeing a fluctuation in prices for when I'm going grocery store shopping, or even fluctuations in gas or anything else that I'm buying. But they are, in my opinion, going up and coming down. I think it has a lot to do with retailers. I try different retailers in our neighborhood, and one week I'll have a good price on X products that I'm looking for, and other weeks at that same grocery store, the price goes up for those particular products, and I'll find them elsewhere for a more reasonable price. So I'm finding by jumping between, three major grocery stores, I can pretty much keep my grocery prices in check. But it would be really nice if a grocery store just were more consistent in terms of the pricing ranges they offer in terms of all the products in their stores. And I don't know, Gary, and sometimes I'm noticing that, I think grocers are struggling to keep their shelves stocked with the elbows up Canada. The people are embracing elbows up Canada approach and buying Canadian products. That I think that they're being challenged in terms of replacing American products on their shelves with an equivalent, something else that consumers would be more than happy to take, especially when it comes down to vegetables and fruits and whatnot, right? And one week I'll walk into a grocery store and I'll find peppers, sweet peppers from Mexico. A couple of weeks later, I'll walk into that same grocery store and all of a sudden we have sweet peppers coming in from someplace in Ontario. And then a couple of weeks later, I'll have sweet peppers coming in from Peru. So and I find this consistent right across the three grocery chains that I go to, and I think that first of all, our grocery chains are trying to get around this whole challenge we have in terms of the Canadians that are making a personal embargo on purchasing American products. First of all, right? So grocery stores are trying to keep up with that demand, and second of all, it comes down to the grocers being honest and trying to keep their customers in their stores. I think it would behoove them to keep the prices as stable as they possibly can. In some cases, maybe eat some of the profits. I'm sure they're never going to operate at a loss, so they're playing with their profit margins. But at the end of the day, by just grocery hopping, I find everything I need at a pretty much average price. So generally, for myself, average cost of groceries is the same. If you want to look at it over the past 6 months to a year, I would think I'm just being a smart grocer. If I just consistently went to one grocery store, then absolutely the price of my groceries will definitely go up because they do fluctuate from product to product. So that's on the grocery chain side. But remember, Gary, like we talked about in the past, grocery stores are there to make money. Okay, as we've seen with a lot of retail organizations, a lot of retail stores, once prices go up exponentially to cover the cost, to cover their operating costs, when situations calm down, like with COVID, right? The prices fall back ever so slowly, and then they'll find reasons why it's taking so long, and then they'll blame the supply chain and so on and so forth. So you know what? I think a lot of the companies are being very stubborn and are sustaining their profit margins more often than not, as opposed to helping the Canadian consumer, right? So that's just my experience over the last few months.
Well, Linnell says if COVID was any indicator when the prices skyrocketed, and it was all corporate greed, and she follows that up with shop around and shop for sales. Now, and you mentioned that you were shopping around as well, Eddie, but here's the thing, especially here in Montreal, for example, how much are you spending in gas and time going from store to store trying to get the best price? And are you, in the long run, are you saving anything?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have a vehicle, and I'm also fortunate enough to live in a section of Montreal where I don't need a vehicle. Right. But my wife and I will shop locally for sure. We know where to buy our products, and quite honestly, I'll take a half-hour drive, a 15, 20-minute drive off the island to some of the other chains off island, and see significant cost savings, especially when it comes to meat, to beef, to pork, to poultry. You just got to be smart about it because, look, as I said, Gary, the companies out there are there to make money, period, right? So I think the consumer has to be extremely smart and be vigilant with their shopping habits, as Manel mentioned earlier on. You got to work at. I think today's society demands that if you want to manage your grocery prices, you have to take some responsibility and be vigilant and be able to be flexible enough to change your shopping habits and work a little harder at it. I'm not going to say it's going to drop your grocery prices by 25 or 50%, but every little bit helps. If you do nothing to help yourself, A, the company you're shopping at is not going to do anything for you. B, the government's not going to do anything for you either. So it behooves you to take some self-initiative to try to, engage in smart shopping options and smart shopping habits. But yes, the prices do go up. Sometimes they'll stay there, and they're very stubborn in terms of coming back, and they'll come up with 10 different excuses as to why prices are so high. What's it going to take, Gary? People boycotting a chain? Let's pick chain A. You know what? Let's have a boycott of this store and see what happens and how quickly they're going to buckle in terms of bringing their prices down. Right?
Didn't they, about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, didn't Loblaws suffer at the hands of a boycott?
Yeah,
I think it
yeah,
was in Ontario in particular.
yeah. I think they did.
Yeah,
I think it was Loblaws, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, it was. It was
Yeah,
Loblaws
yeah,
because I walked into a Loblaws outlet about 3 weeks ago, and the item I was picking up, which I had mentioned on streams before, was up $2 in price. So I wasn't shocked,
yeah.
but I was looking around at some of their other prices, and dear God, like
Yeah, Gary.
they're
Was it
wild, just wild.
was it last week? I think it was last week. I walked into one of the grocery stores in our neighborhood. I usually like to prepare my own coffee, and I buy a tin of coffee. I buy the Colombian brand, which is the no name brand that somebody like Irresistible, for example. Nice Colombian coffee, good body, good quality. I paid $21 for a container about 2 weeks ago or so, 2.5 weeks ago. This same container, Gary, in the same grocery store, 2.5 weeks later, $31, $10 more. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about almost a 40% increase in the cost of the same tin of coffee I bought 2 to 2.5 weeks ago. Now, I kind of look at that extremely suspiciously and say, okay, what gives? You know what? I'm sure you had a supply of coffee in some warehouse someplace that's been sitting there for God knows how long. Don't tell me that all of a sudden the price of coffee has jumped up, that your inventoried coffee in your warehouse all of a sudden has to go up in price. I don't know. That there to me is absolute pure price gouging. So I didn't buy it. I'm just going to wait until the prices come down or I find the sale. That's what I hate, and I think that's what you were referring to earlier on, Gary, with the darn prices going up, boom, for no reason. It's almost like you're filling up your car. One week you're filling it up for a buck 45, right? And then that's a Thursday, right? Saturday morning you got to fill up for whatever reason. It's at a buck 60. Why?
It's the weekend or
Yeah,
a
close
long
to weekend.
Yeah.
Exactly. That irks me to no end, and that's where I think the corporate greed kicks in. Absolutely, that's where the corporate greed kicks in. And who ends up paying for it? You and me, which is really unfair, just because of corporate greed. But yeah, such is the capitalist world, right?
Yeah. Hold that thought for a moment.
Yes.
Greg says, let's face it, whether it be groceries, gas, banks, so on, have you noticed they, in these challenging times, all are making huge profits? I believe is corporate greed, and what we really need is an injection of empathy and fairness. Sadly, neither fit their business model.
Yeah.
I can't argue with you on that one, Greg, for sure. Monel says that she is, oh,
Oh, that's Greg's still one now.
yeah,
That's still Greg's.
yeah, there we go. Boom, gone. Okay, now let's see what happens. Yeah, Monel says I use an app to do all sales shopping, And then we have Deborah, who says, I agree with Greg. During COVID, they had record profits. Since then, they've had record profits and continue to have record profits. And Joe logs in with, just logged on, not sure if it's been mentioned, but there is an app that helps you comparison price shop. It's called Flip. And I'm sure is that the one that you mentioned. So let's go back to the other side of it. Now, I know that all of the grocery retailers are making solid profit margins
Right.
and have been. No, not arguing that. However, in some areas, and especially like beef, for example, the price of beef, like it's like you're going in now and buying a bar of gold.
Yes.
You're going,
Yeah.
you know, whatever retailer, grocery retailer or Costco, beef has jumped. However, something I forgot about in watching an economist or a specialist of some sort the other day, and he brought up the fact that a couple of years ago, during one of the droughts that hit through prairies, especially Alberta in particular, because a lot of beef comes from Alberta. They did not have enough water and they did not have enough natural feed for their herds. So they started culling the herds. Now, beef demand there, and they cannot meet the demand with the supply they have at the moment because it takes a long time to get the herd back up and to a level where the supply is stable and it's a good a solid supply level. The same with poultry. When bird flu and they have to call some of the chicken farms and and that also like eggs. And if you recall, earlier this year, late last year, there was a big push on in the States about the cost of eggs, and because they had to destroy a number of chicken farms, they just had to go in and just wipe them all out because of avian flu. So it takes a while to get that back up, right? We didn't suffer that, so our egg prices were relatively stable, relatively, I say. And then you've got other things, like the wheat on the prairies. If you have a drought and your crop's gone, you have a shortage in the supply of wheat, and yet you've got bakers demanding wheat. So, and then they have to start shopping around, whether it's going offshore or wherever. So, in some cases, the grocery retailers, I think, are getting a little bit of a bad rap because, again, it comes back to what we had up on the screen a few minutes ago about, the impact of severe weather, wildfires, for example. All of these play into our supply chain in this country. And which brings me back to a thought I had when we were talking about, how much produce we actually do import, especially in the winter season.
Right.
Why aren't we, as part of the national plan for food security, food supply security, why are we not looking at putting key huge greenhouses in certain areas across the country that can grow all of our produce and fruits year round in a controlled atmosphere and distribute it to the regions from there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we are going through climate change, or whatever you want to call it. We're going through it. And whether you believe in it or you deny it, the weather just isn't the same as it once was. And you can't count on a normal growing.
Well, and you're right. I mean, we're always when you hear about farms. I mean, the mind typically for a Canadian, myself, maybe it's just my ignorance, but when somebody says farming, I immediately turn my mind in towards the prairie provinces. Okay, in terms of agriculture, I immediately turn to southern Ontario and in BC interior regarding fruits. Okay, but you know what? And when you hear drought, you kind of think about the prairies and whatnot. But I think you're right, Gary. I mean, this weather phenomenon, the impact of weather on our farms is continuing to be devastating and getting worse every year, above and beyond the fires. Look at I think Eastern Canada this year is suffering its worst droughts in decades, and their crops out there that typically we depend on in the rest of the country have been just completely devastated. So yeah, when you're looking at the supply chains as it relates to the impact of weather, you know what? It costs money, and what do suppliers do in terms of the people that work in logistics? Do they just drop buying supplies from whatever a farmer might have out in um, Eastern Canada and start shopping and buying products from other countries to backfill that? Does that cost them more as a result, driving up costs? Who knows? I really don't know, Gary. So yeah, I do agree with you that environmental impact, droughts and whatnot, environmental disasters such as fires will certainly have an impact on the supply chain. Um, but Gary, I think you and I have been long enough to know, even though we've had bumper crop years, even though we've had years with good weather, um, far and few between now. Let's be honest. Even though we had good economic, and not no economic uncertainty, where things were going well in the world. Um, these grocery chains still hike the prices.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You just go through one annual shareholders meeting, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh boy, our shareholders like to make a little bit more money, so let's a jack the prices up, and b, we'll cut some staff while we're at it, and then come up with reasons as to why they do it. So I think Greg is right. It does. It's a combination of things, but corporate greed is absolutely one of them. I don't think anybody can disagree with that. But then I'm going back to the clip of Paulette. He's saying A, B, and C in terms of carny this and carny that about grocery prices and whatnot. Um, I think he's right. But by the same token, I'd certainly like to hear him say, well, this is what a conservative government would do or can do with all the circumstances that are going on. So I really would have loved to have heard that. Maybe, in the next couple of days, he may further elaborate on that. But the point I'm trying to make here, Gary, is um, how does the government get involved in this capitalist society of ours? How does the government get involved in regulating prices on anything, to tell you the truth? What would the conservative government do in terms of mitigating the cost structure of these corporations that are supplying groceries to the Canadian population? I think that's a hard press and a hard ask, but as any good politician, he'll basically challenge it and perhaps do nothing with it. So I don't know, Gary. I don't know what the solution is.
Well, Polyev actually, during that news conference that he staged the other day, I believe it was in a food bank,
Uh-huh.
uh, he did say that he is working with all parties, or trying to work with all parties, to come up with a bill that they would present in the Commons for a vote, and the bill would essentially remove the four taxes that he mentioned, as he called them, the liberal taxes on your food,
Mm-hmm.
would remove those taxes so that it would uh, supposedly help with the actual cost, and help to either stabilize or bring it down somewhat.
Okay, I stand corrected. Thanks for that.
Well, no, he's, you know, he's says he's working with all parties and one party bill, which would include the governing party, the Liberals. Where it goes, I don't know. You know, they've already removed the carbon tax, but he's talking about the industrial carbon tax, which will in turn drive, you know, bring the tax level on carbon back up to what it was with the carbon tax that Carney Nixon when he first won the election.
Right.
Yeah, to me, that part of it is playing with numbers. And if you recall, during the pandemic or just before the pandemic, it's Trudeau and his government brought all grocers together. Remember, they were going to bring prices down by Thanksgiving a couple of years ago. That was the big push.
Mm-hmm.
And that failed to materialize. They're still working on some kind of grocer's code of conduct. And I think Empire, which is the parent company of Sobeys, and their brands, I think they have one brand, signed on recently. And one group that signed on, and I don't know what, but the grocers code of conduct is supposed to keep them a little more focused on reasonable pricing and so on. So Ottawa is very slow in moving on this, and if they feel that that there's some kind of movement behind the scenes against competition, then they can go after them under the Competition Act. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, again, these are all things that I think you and I have heard quite often, quite frequently in regular newscasts from the leaders of our country and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you know, whether it's today, tomorrow, we need some sort of relief that's actually on the sticker prices of anything we buy, especially when it comes to groceries. So, you know what? If there is a bipartisan effort by all parties in the chamber to address this, I'm all for it. But I don't think anybody is in the mood to wait 2 years for this to happen. And you know, I get it. I think we all get it that, you know, on top of the environmental issues that we're dealing with here, we've got the political ramifications with those folks down south of us that are making everybody's lives miserable. But you know what? I get it. That's what we pay our government the big bucks for, is to be nimble on their feet and find solutions around that. And if there's anything I think that our government can control is these corporations from price gouging at a time when people are desperate to put food on their table. If there's any sort of legislation that I'd love to see, bilaterally across all parties and get them to agree to, is table some legislature that would minimize price gouging at difficult times. And Gary, this whole tariff war and the impact on economies around the world, especially ours, it's the worst time not to do something about the corporations' price gouging. You know, people are losing their jobs, B, being furloughed and told to come back in a couple of weeks, C, shifts getting reduced, D, maybe in some cases in non-unionized environments, companies are asking employees to cut back on their salaries in order to survive so they can have jobs. So, you know what? On top of the corporate price gouging, available cash in pocket is slowly being whittled away by both, companies trying to survive, A, B, forget about a cost of living increase at your job if your company is struggling, and C, all these prices going up on a consistent basis. So if there's any sort of legislature I think the government needs to take action on immediately, not 5 months from now, Mr. Carney, now, Mr. Poilievre, and anybody else in the House, you get it done now, and you control these corporations and put legislatures in place that'll prevent them from doing this. You've seen it. I've seen it. I think everybody watching our show are also going to say, yeah, prices are going up. And I said, yes, prices do go up and down in certain grocery stores. So that means I have to be nimble. But in general, prices are definitely going up. I mean, your statement for a pound of beef is basically a pound of flesh off my back, pretty much. I mean, it's ridiculous how quickly the price of beef has gone up. So yeah, I'd really like to see our government get some legislature in there and control these mega corporations.
At least rough them up a bit, and what, we're watching you.
Yeah.
But coming back to your coffee issue, there is some kind of an issue with coffee beans down in South America, and so be prepared that coffee prices will go up even more so. And same with the cocoa. Small can like this, a small can about that big around is now $7.99. And
wow.
There's a shortage, and there's actually one bar in Prince Edward Island that's trying a different type of cocoa for their chocolate ice cream, make their own ice cream, and the bag that they're buying, I forget, the bigger bag, and he said $600 a bag.
$600. Oh my.
Yep. So that's where it stands. I think retailers definitely have to share some blame for this for sure, because they're doing okay profit-wise and their shareholders are happy. But I also think that we have to remember some other things that have happened over the last couple of years with the beef and birds and wildfires and drought. And if you say Eastern Canada this year, dry. The blueberry crop in Canada, especially in the Brunswick area, basically gone, done.
Wow. Yeah.
So I haven't heard that very often in Europe. So, we have to remember that whether, as I said earlier, whether you believe in climate change or you don't, you have to admit the weather patterns have been changing, and not necessarily for the better.
Yeah, true.
And that all comes into play as well. So it's something, every time we walk through the door of a grocery store, we're going to be watching, we're going to be feeling, and it's not going to get any easier. And of course, we're coming into a peak season with the Christmas season not that far away.
True.
It'll be interesting to see what turkeys are going for in 2 weeks with Thanksgiving coming up.
Yeah, it's look. All we've seen so far is slow climbing up. In some product lines, it's just spiked, like we talked about coffee, but it just seems to be a gradual, nonstop uphill slope of the prices just going up. Every little bit adds up to a lot after 4 to 8 weeks. It just seems to be relentless. And you know what? It's not a necessary evil. People have to eat. Okay, this is not a luxury. And again, I'm not going to go back in my government rant, but they have to do something.
Joe says, I guess we're all going on a diet. Yeah, for sure. Coming up, the financial woes at Canada Post come to a head. First, Eddie and I enjoy putting together this stream each week. Now it began over Saturday morning coffees. And now, guess what? You can contribute to our coffee habit through the Buy Me a Coffee link. And it's in the description below, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. Eddie and I thank you for your support and the coffee.
Absolutely. And Gary, a financial crisis at Canada Post again, and it's boiled over. And the government's plan has sparked an immediate strike. No mail. Again.
I'm instructing Canada Post to introduce flexibilities in their delivery standards. The average households receive just 2 letters per week, yet operations are still designed for much higher volumes. Adjusting delivery standards will allow non-urgent mail to travel by ground instead of air and will save more than $20 million a year to the corporation. Next, the government is removing the moratorium on the conversion to community mailboxes. 3/4 of Canadians already receive mail through community, apartment, or rural mailboxes, while 1/4 still receive door-to-door delivery. It's an expensive service, and by way of example, delivering mail to an individual address costs the corporation $279 a year, whereas delivering mail to a community mailbox costs $157 a year. And 77% of Canadians already receive mail through various form of community boxes. As such, I'm authorizing Canada Post to introduce community mailboxes to approximately 4 million more addresses, which will save the corporation nearly $400 million per year in due term. Now, as recommended in the Kaplan report, we'll also be lifting the rural moratorium, and I'm instructing Canada Post to come back with a plan that will ensure protection of service in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. Areas that used to be rural or even urban. It also means that multiple post offices operating near each other, including some just a few hundred meters apart, are required to stay open because of the moratorium. Lifting this moratorium will allow Canada Post to right-size its network to adapt to today's demographics, but I want to be clear. Canada Post has an obligation to serve all Canadians in every community in Canada, and that will not change. Lastly, the government is reviewing the process for increases to the stamp rate to modernize and shorten it in line with Commissioner Kaplan's recommendations. Taken together, these measures will help stabilize Canada Post's financial situation by generating close to $500 million per year.
Well,
Yeah.
Canada Post is in some serious trouble. And just before we get into that, there's a comment that just popped in from Facebook that I don't know why, but it did. Seems to be a slow response from Facebook. So anyway, let's bring this up. Nancy says Northern Europe is very innovative. We seem to just follow how the U.S. farm. I think we need to investigate some of Northern Europe's new farming opportunities. Definitely, and the Prime Minister has been over there on a regular basis, so maybe he can take the Agriculture Minister and a few others over with him and have some discussion with them about this. And if I'm still breaking up, let me know, because I did some work behind the scenes here while we were playing that clip and Eddie was carrying on without me. Anyhow.
You're good right now. You're good.
Okay. So here's the whole thing with Canada Post. Now, that was last week and late last week. And no sooner had that news conference come to an end, but all of a sudden on social media, it starts spreading that Canada Post is on strike. I was just at the post office trying to send a registered letter, and they said no. And Cup W walked out across the country. And so here we are in the midst of a postal strike once again. Remember, we had a postal strike back late November into mid-December, and the government finally stepped in and put them back to work. But every time, and I don't know what the postal union is thinking, because every time you cause a disruption like this, you're losing more customers. And when you listen to the numbers, and the minister made reference to that in his comments, in some of the comments that I clipped from it, Minister Joel Lightbound, and, the cost of delivery per door, the annual cost of delivery per door mail volume has gone down, meaning the price has gone up because it was at $169, $179 a year per door, and now it's up to 200 and some odd per door because the volume of mail has gone down. So they're not pulling in the revenue on the letter side, but they're still paying a postal worker a decent, more than a decent wage in a lot of cases. And I'm beginning to think, and I've heard some other people commenting the same way, I'm beginning to think that, has the postal union kind of brought some of this on itself with its work disruptions, and then with the very lucrative contracts that it's negotiated? However, I'm not putting the full blame on the union because somebody on the other side eventually agreed to whatever the demands were at Canada Post and at the federal government, ultimately
Right.
the federal government. And I don't know if you caught it, but one of the things that he did say, the minister did say the other day is, first of all, Canada Post has 45 days to come up with some kind of a plan to implement what the minister has laid down, what the government's laying down, and which includes the new community mailboxes and the reduction of door-to-door delivery. But he also said there will be a reduction in the size of management at Canada Post as well.
Right.
Which,
and, well, Gary, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Both sides of the table are failing in some areas in terms of understanding exactly what the business model for Canadian Post should be. Canadian postal delivery should be. Whether that's Canada Post or not is yet to be determined over the next few years. But look, I mean, you're running a business. You kind of look at what the demands are for the business. First of all, as you mentioned, going on strike is just a loss of money again, right? But from a union perspective, I'm all for unions, but there comes a point in time where the unions are their own worst enemy sometimes. Like I from an operating perspective, going through an operational audit, it's always about what is the demand, what exactly is the work that needs to be done out there, and how much of it needs to be done, and does it have to be done, and how do we sustain services in the populated areas and the remote regions, which just 100% depend on Canada Postal Services, whether it's mail or whether it's parcel delivery and whatnot. Okay, has anybody sat down and actually laid out, here's how much work is involved in doing the work we need to do for Canada Post? Now, I don't know what the answer is, Gary. I don't know what that figure looks like. Could it be that in some specific sectors of Canada Post that they're way, way overstaffed in terms of the frontline delivery personnel and the management related and associated with that delivery personnel? Has anybody actually looked at that? I haven't heard anything in the grapevine or on the media channels in terms of, this is how many employees we actually need. We have X amount of employees and we have X plus 1,000. Does that make good business sense? And I know the union is there to protect employees' jobs. I get that. But at some point, it comes down to looking at the sanctity and the well-being of the company as well. Are the unions basically saying, well, you guys are going to lose money, and we have to protect these extra 1,000 jobs no matter, come hell or high water. And you know what? I'm sorry, company, you're going to have to figure out a way. At some point, we continue to work at deficits, and because of the fact we're a crown corporation, we're going to, it's a crown corporation at right now. Do you still want to continue price gouging or employee gouging because it's the government is basically running this thing? Where does it stop, Gary? I mean, it seems to be every year we have some sort of a fiasco with some element of Canada Post that's going to be going on strike. I mean, you have, I think, two unions or two or three unions that that support different employees in different areas. But like, wow, when does it stop? And I feel for these remote regions, and I feel for the elderly, Gary. I mean, these people need mail. They need their services. Our population is aging, and a lot of the aging population is not digital savvy, if you want to call it. What are they doing? They depend on their checks. What are they doing? They depend on prescriptions being delivered, or God knows what. It's just it's a little too much right now. I'm really getting frustrated and fed up that we just can't put this to bed. And why can we not have? I don't want to see our service disruption for the next 5 years, whatever that is. Like, figure it out. I mean, how? Yeah. I don't know, Gary. I'm just frustrated. Like, I'm just frustrated. How hard can it be to figure out? Run the company, deal with it.
I'm frustrated that the Trudeau government over the last 10 years has just continued to kick this can down the road, as he did with a whole lot of things. And even the Harper government before him didn't really deal with the issues at Canada Post either. It was just one of those things like, okay, now you've got people arguing it's a public service and, we need public service no matter what the cost. Well, okay, it might be a public service, and it might, back in the day, it was very definitely a much needed public service. But the fact of the matter is, it's not anymore. And sadly for those employees at Canada Post who are now out on the picket lines, if they haven't come to realize that even as our population ages, and of course we know what happens is eventually that demographic will be no more, right?
Right.
Because it's a natural thing. And the demographics coming behind us boomers, for example, they well, Jen, when was the last time you used mail? Yeah, see? She just
Did you say what? What's that? Yeah, you're right. Even my stepson, I'm sure if I asked him when was the last time he used mail, he'd be hard pressed to say the last time I put a stamp on anything and sent it. Probably can't remember, if ever. I probably mailed it for him.
Yeah, exactly. I went downstairs the other day and cleaned out our postal box. So, good time. They're out on strike and get rid of it. And when I opened it, there was the monthly Costco magazine. Okay, that's ours. There were 3 other envelopes in there, all from the previous tenant, which is like 14 months ago since they've moved on. And I don't know if he hasn't changed his address or we keep sending these things back and somewhere along the way, Canada Post is not clued into that they no longer live at this address. I don't know what it is, but that's what was in my mailbox. 3 weeks before that, I went down and all I did was I went through nothing but flyers and real estate cards, and that was it.
Basically, trees getting cut down for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where are the tree huggers? Why are they not hollering about this? But the fact of the matter is, I don't need Canada Post. I don't use it. I haven't used it, and I can't remember how long, and I don't care if it closes up tomorrow. Now, yes, I understand the people in remote areas, and yes, I think there are ways around it. And you know what? Probably the easiest and best way is to contract it out. Find a private company to run the remote post offices and delivery of whatever mail there is. Because I thought I heard somewhere in this whole fiasco something about the average person now gets 2 letters a week or something.
Really?
Or there was some weird figure like that. Now, or maybe I heard it the way I wanted to hear it, as so often.
That's a lot of mail.
Yes.
Well, when they say letter, are they talking about the garbage that shows up in your mailbox inclusive?
No, I think they were talking actual mail.
Okay.
So, but let's look at the challenges of Canada Post right now, like persistent financial losses. Canada Post has run multi-billion-dollar deficits in recent years. Government says bailout's not a viable long-term solution. Duh, do you think?
Yeah.
Finally, somebody's getting a clue in Ottawa. Declining letter volume and digital substitution. As traditional mail volumes fall, the cost of delivery per item rises, making delivery model for low volume mail harder to sustain.
Well,
Right.
hence my argument about the unions trying to keep all the employees' jobs. It's just point number two clearly indicate that's just a model that's not sustainable.
Yep. Service inefficiencies and legacy infrastructure, door-to-door delivery, smaller post offices, fixed daily delivery standards create high structural costs. Yep, bang on. Mandate redefinition versus universal service. Reform is premised on redefining what Canada Post must provide us versus what it should provide as a public service. And urgency and political leverage. The government has given Canada Post 45 days to produce a transformation plan, signaling further delay is unacceptable. Damn straight. Get your butts into the boardroom, get on ChatGPT or Claude or Google Gemini and get them to help you figure it out and come back with a plan. But the plan really should be like, they can't even deliver parcels and be counted upon. They can't deliver parcels. And we just lost Eddie again. I think I may have caused him to go, and run. So anyway, let's take a quick look. We have a comment here. So Eddie may pop in while we're doing the comment. Why is that popping up? Oh, remove. There we go. And add to the broadcast. Okay, Deborah says, I think Canada Post, as all government sectors, is management heavy, but the first thing government does is shut down our programs and lay off the people who do the work. So what you're saying is, Deborah, then, yeah, clean house at the top. No question. Definitely needs that. Totally agree. But also, if the volumes are down on the actual mail that they're handling and parcels, and then we don't need as many frontline workers either. And frankly, again, I would suggest that we don't need Canada Post in urban areas. And I think maybe the ultimate answer is contract out the postal service or some level of postal service to the remote communities, and that's it. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't say it's just not sustainable the way it is, Gary, at the end of the day, right?
Nope, it's not. It's worse than the CBC from a financial standpoint, you know?
Yeah.
And there's another one where, Carney promised, what was it? I forget how many extra million, 150 extra $1 million in funding or something like that to the CBC. They're getting over $1 billion a year, each year. And one of their biggest problems is they have no viewership. And on top of that, they're not going to have a lot of viewership because they're all over the map. They're trying to be all things to all people. You've got them on about half a dozen different platforms that most Canadians don't even use. And they're out there doing their little thingies, and all in the name of promoting Canadian talent. Well, you're not really promoting much if nobody's watching it, or they don't have access to it because you have it behind a paywall. Why in the hell am I paying CBC to have access to something?
Exactly.
I'm already paying every April when I do my damn income tax. I should not, as a Canadian citizen in this country, have to pay anything further to the CBC to access programming.
Well, you know what? Gem has got some really decent programming, and I don't go to it, Gary, because I'm not going to pay for that. I'm already paying for the damn thing, just like you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So there's no reason. And here's the other thing. Get the ads off CBC. They're a publicly funded organization, and if they can't make a go of it on $1 billion a year, get rid of the upper management levels, and then have a look at what they're doing and redefine it, then it can go the way of Canada Post. So, and let's go. We've got a couple more comments, so let's bring those up. Okay. Remove from broadcast. And I thought I removed that. Okay, Nancy says Canada Post obsolete, waste of money, shut it down. Thank you, Nancy. And Deborah comes in. I agree, Gary. However, my concern is they will lay off mail carriers and keep the managers. Well, the minister has already served notice publicly to Canada Post management that the management the management ranks have to be thinned as well. Hopefully he will carry through on that aspect. But again, when you get to the frontline workers, if the volume is down, then we don't need as many frontline workers to handle the volume that's there, if you're going to keep postal service. And you know what? They're not going to need as many people when they go to the community mailboxes, because you just need one person doing a run, and they've got all, boom, and away they go. It's not going door to door to door to door. And also, I thought I saw something, and I'd have to go back now because I have a question mark in my mind, but I thought they were talking about that daily delivery would continue to businesses. Why?
Right. If there are businesses that are more, it's the businesses that are more digital. Businesses are not digital these days. It's pretty tough to run a business. So yeah, why?
Yeah. So,
well, you know what? Come to think of it. So, we're looking at all these flyers coming in from the grocery stores and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? They can actually contribute to make the tree huggers happy. B, allow our trees to generate oxygen in the forest where they should be. And C, cut back on the amount of garbage that the postal carriers have to drag along with them and stuff in the mailboxes that end up in the recycling bin anyway. They should go digital. They should, send 1 or 2 last publications, stuff it in everybody's mailbox and say, here's our website if you need to see what our sales are. And you know what? Stop putting that garbage in the trucks and the cars and the bicycle racks of these mailmen. Then we'll have a great idea to say, well, you know what? There is nothing more that you need to carry, so we don't need you. I think the grocery chains and all these advertisers and these real estate agencies who really think there's a huge return on investment by putting these paper flyers out, they should rethink their marketing strategies and advertising strategies. And besides, they probably save a lot of money in outsourcing to printing organizations, right? And that causes a whole other issue in terms of.
Well, I was going to say the only advantage they're getting from printing those cards and everything is the fact that it's a tax expense at the end of the year. So.
Yeah, exactly. So you know what? Get rid of this garbage, which is probably 80% of the weight in the truck anyway.
Yeah, and we have Joe chiming in here too. So where are we here? All right.
What does he say?
Joe says, as Bob Dylan once sang, the times they are changing. Technology, AI, robotics, and on it goes. That's right. And yes, I understand there are some older people who have not adapted to the digital era, and for various reasons. And there are other people who just aren't capable of, being able to do that. I get that. But there are ways around that. Everything else, we, as a society, survive. But this throwing money at Canada Post and the way it's been, and like I say, the unions are the Canadian Union of Postal Workers is just as much to blame as management at Canada Post as governments. Various
Right.
federal governments have been for kind of turning a blind eye to it because they knew it was going to be a hot potato, a mess to try and clean up. Shame on all of them. And as they say, the Canada Post workers get a really good salary. They get, I was shocked with this one. And it's around 8 to 10 personal days a year. Then you get your 13 or 14, 15 stat holidays per year. And then their vacation time on top of that.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good gig. Yes, they're out in all kinds of weather and they have the odd dog nipping at them sort of thing, and you couldn't pay me enough to go out and deal with that kind of foolishness. But it's still, I think they have a pretty solid contract, and maybe their union is overstretched. But again, shame on management for agreeing to it, and shame on the politicians for caving in because there was some public pressure instead of them saying, look, you know what? This is not good. This is not sustainable. They have to go back to the bargaining table.
And one more, shame on the previous governments for not doing anything about this and saying, well, we'll deal with it next mandate. Shame on them for the last 10 to 12 years for completely neglecting this.
Right.
And again, Gary, I think both you and I agree that these are very hardworking individuals. I mean, I've seen them slogging around these, driving through 3-foot high snow and slogging through the snow and delivering mail to both condominium complexes and individual homes. In my old place, when I owned a home, knew the mail guy very well. Pleasant exchanges, but hard work. And you're right, they're well paid and they have good benefits and whatnot. I think my point of contention is there are too many mailmen for the amount of work that needs to be done. A, and B, I think a lot of the stuff they're delivering is just pure garbage and a waste of paper and trees. To tell you quite frankly, cut that back, you'll have a clear-cut idea in terms of what essential mail really is, both from a business perspective and both from a government perspective in terms of getting the necessary checks out to people. And as you're saying, that population is slowly starting to dwindle out. And it is going to become a digital age. So you know what? I think this is a great opportunity to start now. Let's make the damn decisions now and really understand what we need out there for as a workforce if Canada Post remains a crown corporation, or go the ways of the United States, the way they're doing it. No problem there, it seems. But look, one rock at a time. But they got to really sit at the table and make some real difficult decisions on both sides of the table. And you know what? I hate seeing people losing their jobs, but you know what? When you're pumping $1 billion in or whatever the case is just to keep them afloat, it makes zero sense when you and I, and people are going into stores and finding prices going up. Everything is going up and getting less and less services for our tax dollars. So something's got to give. And, unfortunately, I would tend to agree with you, Gary. It's, the days of Canada Post are certainly should be
numbered.
Over. Numbered sooner rather than later.
Yep, absolutely. Definitely. Okay, coming up, we're going to have a look at women on top, Canadian athletes really making a mark. But first, just want to share a little something with you because this is not by any stretch of the imagination a paid ad. I just want to let you know that I have found a Canadian-based cloud storage alternative to OneDrive, Google Drive, and iCloud Drive, Sync.com, based here in Canada, which means under the guise of Canadian privacy laws. So If you want to find out more about sync.com, click the link in the description below and have a look around, and good luck.
Yeah, Gary, and you know what? Let's get on to the fun stuff here. I mean, we talked about a lot of important things, but a lot to be proud of in segment 3. From the pitch to the rink, from the pool to the court, Canadian women are making history in global competition. Let's look at how and why this matters for the future of Canadian sport.
And you suggested this topic the other day,
yes,
and I thought,
yes, I did.
Wow, yeah, and it was after the Canadian women's rugby team.
Rugby, yeah.
Yep. Now they lost, but bang.
What a run!
Yeah, exactly.
What a run!
And that's they're going to be a team to deal with going forward, no question. And then we've had some real success in the pools lately, as far as swimming. World records. And then we've got the hockey league.
Mm-hmm. We talked about it during the season last year, the Professional Women's Hockey League, and how well, except for one city, I think it was New York, every one of them was profitable and almost selling out. Wow, it's just such a breath of fresh air to seeing the women doing well. You know what? Let me get off with the rugby. I mean, what a run! I watched a few of their games, more on a replay basis, but it was really, really impressive in terms of how these rugby players, the women rugby players, did in the recent World Championship. You're looking at it's a story. I mean, it's a real big story in terms of Canada being the Cinderella team playing against the Goliaths in this tournament. And Canada was considered a Cinderella team actually making it into the Final Four. They had their preliminary rounds. There were 4 divisions. There was 4 teams each, and they played a preliminary round, Gary, and they won that clean slate. 3 wins, no losses, no ties. So they ended up the top of their pool, and they were joined by England, New England, and France, the top 4 teams in the entire tournament. And much so that they outscored their opponents points for and points against 121, which is really, really incredible for a team like this. And you have to understand too, Gary. Canadian rugby is not. There are no professional leagues in Canada that the women play in. Most of these organizations that they play for are high end. Are high-end local teams and regional teams, or within the university level, but there's nothing really from a professional side. Now, these women, were playing against juggernauts. They were playing against European teams, England, New Zealand, South Africa was in a tournament. All of these countries have professional leagues for women. So most of these teams and athletes they're playing against are of the professional grade, and that's why the Canadian story for women's rugby is just so Cinderella. Much so that I'll get to the entire tournament, but anyway, Canada made it out of the preliminary rounds, and the first quarterfinal match was against Australia. They beat them handily, 46-5. I saw replays of that game. I mean, they had absolute, complete control of the game. And then their next game was against New Zealand. Now, New Zealand, when it comes to rugby, are kings, whether it's men or the women's teams. And of course, I watched part of the game. Always watched the New Zealand go through their haka routine, and the Canadian women just stared them down at the line, which really made me proud. And Canada was not expected to win that game. In fact, if you looked at the media, New Zealand was supposed to just skate circles and really beat them bad. And you know what? Canada controlled that game from the beginning to end, and they won 34-19 to beat New Zealand. I mean, what an accomplishment that was by them. And there was one time I was watching them trying to get into the end and into the zone for New Zealand to score. And they spent almost 5 minutes just pounding into that goal line with the New Zealand players just stopping them every time. And they just kept going, and they finally got in. And it's just the will and determination. Seeing this effort by the girls' team was just the women's team was really made me proud as a Canadian, proud of them for their accomplishments. And so they essentially made it into the finals against England. Now, I was looking at some interviews from the New Zealand players, and they were basically saying, hats off to Canada. They were outplayed, they were outmatched, they were outthunk, they were out strategized. So, hats off to the players, hats off for the coaching staff to really get the entire team ready and motivated against New Zealand. And this past Saturday, of course, at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Canada played against England for the finals. And of course, England, New Zealand were placed 1 and 2 in terms of them going into the final. Canada was not. And you know what? Canada scored first. You certainly did see a lot of nerves on these girls' faces because let's look at this. We're talking about some semi-pro, maybe a handful of pro players, and mostly amateur players from Canada playing against a juggernaut of England, which were mostly professional players. And they held their own. 33-13, they lost at the end of the day. But the admiration and respect from the fans at the stadium, which was sold out, by the way, again, I think there was something like 75,000 seats, of which Prime Minister Carney was an active participant.
I saw that.
And they lost 33-13, but what a game. There was one point in the game where Canada was pressing. And you know what? I think 2 or 3 mistakes ended up being costly for Canada. Even when they were down 21-10, they just kept at it. They kept at it. So England won, but it wasn't a pushover. They really had to work for their championship. So at the end of the day, Canada ended up in second place. New Zealand played France for third place. They won 42-26. And here's the beauty of this, Gary. Okay, Canada, considered the Cinderella story of the entire tournament, the player of the year for with the World Rugby Federation for women. The player of the year is none other, out of Victoria, British Columbia, Sophie Degaude. She won the Player of the Year award. So what does that tell you? I mean, what an esteemed level of respect by the governing body for rugby to recognize a player of such caliber amongst all of these countries that are just so prolific in rugby. So good on them. And not only that, with Canada's defeat of New Zealand, Gary, get this. Canada women's team is now ranked number 2 in the world. Wow. I am so proud. I got goosebumps. What an amazing accomplishment by these women. And by the way, the United States didn't make it out of the preliminary round and they're ranked 10th. Now, here's the beauty of this, Gary. Think about that. You know how difficult it is, I mean, both you and I being Canadians, how difficult it is to get government funding to allow people to excel in their preferred choice of sports. And it's not easy to get money. It's not easy to get corporate money to allow these individuals to train. Now, again, most of these women are amateurs, so they've got full-time jobs. And after the full-time jobs, they make time for family, they make time for rugby in the evenings and rugby on the weekends, on top of all the tournaments they have to attend. So some of these other countries, A, are professional, and B, even at the university level, like in the United States, I mean, just about everything is completely funded where you don't have to worry about money or where your next meal is going to come from, especially when you're at elite level university sports in the United States. Yet, here is Canada, number 2, ranked behind England and ahead of New Zealand, which is number 3. So what a remarkable accomplishment by the women when it came to rugby. Congratulations. My wife and I watched she was there for the opening ceremonies. We both had goosebumps and tears in our eyes when they played that national anthem. And that national anthem was sung in both French and in English amongst everybody right across from end to end on that team. Good on them for promoting Canada. Good on them for promoting Canada being a bilingual country. And wonderful congratulations for putting Canada on the map again on the world stage. What an absolutely remarkable tournament.
So let me ask you this, Eddie. With the successes that Canadian women athletes have experienced, especially in the last year, and
Right.
even just in the last 4 or 5 months, is women's sports finally getting its due, especially here in Canada?
Yeah. You know what? I would say not enough. Okay, I think there's got to be more recognition towards the women, not just by and it has to be recognition by the corporate bodies in order to further fund programs to develop to get youngsters into sports. Whether it's tennis, whether it's athletics, whether it's soccer, hockey, and whatnot. All of this is very, very expensive, especially when you want to advance to elite levels. And you know what? Parents can only afford so much, and in order to get more girls developing to elite levels, you have to have programs that are subsidized when they're basically late grade school, when they're in their teens. That's when you develop them. So by the time they're 17, 18, and 19, they're already at an elite level. And without money, that's impossible to do, which makes this feat by the Canadian women's rugby team that much more admirable. So to answer your question, Gary, yes, they made tremendous progress, leaps and bounds. But you know what? More has to be done to promote women's sports. I mean, I'll give you another example. I'm not going to talk about hockey because essentially hockey has been a two country sport in the world level, and it's always been number one and number two being Canada, US, Canada. They usually end up in all the finals in the World Championships or the Olympics. So the other countries are catching up, but Canada and USA, it's basically neck and neck when it comes to ice hockey, which is a very expensive sport, regardless if you're a young boy or a young girl. It's a very expensive sport. Let's just go back to Olympics, okay? Just for your information, in 1976, Gary, when we had our first Olympics in Canada, based in that was held in Montreal in 1976, the women won.
Oops. Well, I think we're going to be left in the lurch waiting for how many medals the women won back in 1970.
Medals in 2024. Yeah.
Okay.
1976 Montreal. Yeah.
Go ahead.
The 1976, the women yielded 11 medals. In 2024, the women yielded 20 medals. So we went from 11 to 20 medals between these two Olympics. Now get this: in 2024, the women won 20 of the medals to the men's 7. So
Wow.
the ladies, the gals, the women in the Paris Olympics in 2024 outdid the Canadian men 20-7. So it just goes to show you when governments and corporations do invest in the youngsters of this country and help them evolve and help develop their athletic skills, what the outcome is. It puts the country on the map. The last championships, I mean, Summer McIntosh, I mean, she was breaking records left, right, and center. This is not because she's jumping into a pool every Saturday morning and competing. This is because she's got backing from the government programs and some corporate programs to help develop that raw talent and skill to the level it is right now. So I think Canada as a country is seeing slow progression in terms of our youngsters developing into elite athletes. But you know what? I think more can be done. And you know what? The ladies seem to be getting a lot of recognition globally, the Canadian women. probably much more so than the men of late, except maybe for the hockey piece. But you know what? Look at soccer. Canada is presently ranked ninth to the United States second place. That's quite an accomplishment considering how popular soccer is around the world, right? What else was I looking at today? Tennis. Victoria Mboko. She's only 19 years old. And Gary, the Tennis Association ranks the top 200 players. She's ranked 23rd.
Yep.
And she's only 19 years of age. So, you know what, Gary? The women are they're definitely putting a footprint on the world map when it comes to sports, especially big ticket item sports. But I think that we as Canadians, our governments and corporations in Canada, it would behoove them to you know what, sponsor, pay, subsidize, because it only promotes our country. And you know what? At the end of the day, a lot of times the level of sports and the capability of athletes within the country actually advertises the well-being of the country, right? So I mean that's just the way it is. And I'm really proud of their Canadian women's rugby team. I'm really proud of the women Canadian soccer team, the hockey teams, and every accomplishment. When you hear the guys do it, okay, great. You know what? We expect them to be there, but to have the women up there with the guys neck and neck in terms of Canadian pride, you know what? Wear the flag proudly, and I think we as Canadian citizens should do our utmost to try to support these women, both on social media, watch their games, support them, attend some of their games. And you know what? I'm guilty of not attending enough of them. But certainly it's very motivational, and what these girls in the rugby world did, very motivating and inspirational. I'm really hoping that a lot of girls were watching the game and want to become rugby players. Tough, brutal sport, Gary. I mean, some of the contact you will hear. I mean, body on body contact. I mean, you can see she's grimacing in pain on the ground, and the referee comes and asks her if she's okay, and she goes, "No, I'm getting up. I'll be fine." And you can see her leg barely works. Tough, tough, tough girl. So, you know what, Gary? If you missed that game, shame on you, because it was one hell of a game. A good day to be Canadian.
I actually watched the highlights yesterday.
Did you?
And yeah, I did, because I was thinking we could maybe put a couple in, but I erred on the side of caution because of copyright issues, and I didn't want us to get involved in that. But it was a tough game, and you know they were up against some pretty big girls on the other side, and man, oh man, yeah. You know, beyond the medals, it goes to, you know, equity, role models for younger girls here in Canada coming up through now, and of course, you know, our country's place in global competition.
Right. Exactly.
But I think one of the key things here really is the role models, that younger girls do have some role models now to look up to. Not that they didn't before, but with this surge that we seem to be experiencing, you know, you're going to have that much more as far as choices are concerned for role models for the younger girls. So
with every accomplishment, my granddaughter Gary, she is nuts about ice hockey. She goes and sees the Montreal Victoire. She loves it. She's learning how to skate. I mean, anything that the women's team in Canada, women's teams or individual athletes accomplish and is publicized, it essentially trickles down at some point, and the more they accomplish, the greater of a role model they become. So it's good all around. Just so proud of them. I'm so proud to be a Canadian when I see that.
Very much so. And guess what, Eddie? We're coming up to the bewitching hour.
Oh, wow. Well, that'll do it for episode 53 of Night Talk Canada. From the grocery aisle to your mailbox to the world stage of sports, these stories show how Canadians are being challenged, tested, and inspired. I'm Eddie Dekalik. Good night.
And remember to like, subscribe, and share. Even if you are watching one of the replays, it really does help expose our stream and channel to more people like you. Honest, unfiltered, Canadian, the conversation we should be having. And if you're a dog owner, for God's sakes, remember to pick up after your dog. Otherwise, you don't deserve to be a dog owner. Night Talk
Well
Canada
said.
returns in 7 days. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good
Good night.
night.